Assalamu alaikum, dear students. Hope you are healthy and hearty. Welcome to NIEBS Homeschool. This is Fatema Sabrin, Shikha, Assistant Teacher of English, National Ideal English Version School, Morning Shift. Today I am going to take Bangladesh and Global Studies class for the students of class 5 on the topic Chapter 1, Lesson 1 to 3. I am repeating. Today our topic is Chapter 1, Lesson 1 to 3, and it will be reading done. Students, our today's lecture is lecture 1 and homework number will be also 1. Now dear students, please take your textbook. We are going to read from the text chapter 1, lesson 1 to 3. So let's start. Students, please open page number 2, chapter 1. The title is Our Liberation War. I'm repeating, the title is Our Liberation War, and I'm going to start from lesson 1, and it is Outbreak of War. So look at the text. You have to read this and you have to memorize this. The War of Liberation is the year 1971, is a glorious event in the history of our nation. Through this war, we achieved independence for Bangladesh. So with the history of liberation war, we come to know that in the year of 1971 we got our independence after a 9-month war. After the British left India in 1947, 2 sovereign countries were created. So in 1947, 2 sovereign countries were created, and it was India and Pakistan. That means India and Pakistan were divided at the time of 1947. Pakistan comprised East and West Pakistan, and ever since 1947, the rulers of West Pakistan tormented the East. So when they divided, that means Pakistan and India divided into 2 sovereign countries, Pakistan became East Pakistan and West Pakistan from the 1947, and the people and the government of West Pakistan used to oppress the people of East Pakistan. Here students look, the rulers of West Pakistan tormented the East. Tormented means tortured. I'm repeating, tormented means tortured. They tortured the people of East Pakistan. In protest, a number of attempts of resistance took place. They are listed below. So look, there are a lot of resistance happened from 1952 to 1971, and here is the list of these incidents. Here we start with 1957. In this year, language movement happened. So what happened in 1952? Language movement. Come to 1966. In this year, 6-point movement happened. In 1969, mass upsurge was happened. In 1970, Malik's victory in general election. 1971 of 25th March, barbaric attacks by Pakistani armed forces met with protest and resistance. So there was barbaric attacks by Pakistani armed forces, and it was happened on 25th March 1971, and at last we can see 26th March 1971, and this is the beginning. This was the beginning of liberation war after the declaration of independence by Bangabandhu. So from here we got the clue of our independence, or the journey of independence started with the declaration of Bangabandhu. As soon as the war was declared, the first government of Bangladesh was formed on 10th April 1971. Students, this is very important. When the first government of Bangladesh was formed, and it was the date of 10th April 1971 when the first government of Bangladesh was formed on. It was known as the Mujibnagar government. So the government that was formed on 10th April 1971, it was known as Mujibnagar government. It took its oath on 17th April at Ambagan in the Boidhanath Tala village in former Meherpur subdivision. Now it is known as Meherpur district. Bangabandhu Sheikh Mujibur Rahman was declared as the president of Bangladesh. So who was the president of the then Bangladesh? it was Bangabandhu Sheikh Mujibur Rahman. But since he was imprisoned in Pakistan, Vice President Syed Nazrul Islam became the acting president. So in the absence of Bangabandhu Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, as he was imprisoned in Pakistan, it was Syed Nazrul Islam who was in the position of vice president that time. The other key members of this government were Tajuddin Ahmed, who was Prime Minister of Bangladesh, Captain M. Mansoor Ali, he was Minister of Finance and Planning, and A. H.M. Kamarul-Zaman, who was Minister of Home Affairs, and altogether he was Relief and Rehabilitation Minister. This government played a crucial role in conducting the war, raising support at home and abroad, and sustaining public opinion. So the former government of Bangladesh, they played a crucial role in conducting the war, and their strength helped us to gain the independence. After the formation of Mujibur government, the war of liberation accelerated. This government led people from every sphere to set the country free from the enemy. So here we have learned about the government of Mujibnagar, and we have known about the incident that happened from 1952 to 1971, and it was about lesson 1, outbreak of war. Now students, come to page number 4. Here we will learn about lesson 2, military in liberation war. Military in liberation war. The military force of the war was set up on 11th July 1971 and was called the Mukti Bahini. Students, please mark here. You will get a question about Mukti Bahini. So who are called Mukti Bahini? The military force of the war was set up on 11th July 1971 and it is called Mukti Bahini. It was led by General Ataul Goni Osmani as Commander-in-Chief. His deputy was Group Captain A.K. Khondokar. The Mukti Bahini forces were divided into 3 brigades. So first mark this line. It was led by General Ataul Goni Osmani as Commander-in-Chief. So the question is, who was the Commander-in-Chief of Mukti Bahini? And the answer will be General Ataul Goni Osmani was the Commander-in-Chief of Mukti Bahini. And if I ask you who was the group captain of Mukti Bahini, and you have to answer that A.K. Khondokar. He was the group captain of Mukti Bahini. And Mukti Bahini, or this force, were divided into 3 brigades, and they are K force under Major Khalid Musharraf, S force under Major K.M. Shafiullah, Z force under Major Ziaur Rahman. So how many brigades were about Mukti Bahini? There were 3 brigades, and they are K force, S force, Z force. And you can say K force for Khalid Musharraf, S force for Shafiullah, Z force for Ziaur Rahman. Students, mark here before their names Khalid Musharraf, K.M. Shafiullah, Ziaur Rahman, you have to say major, because they are before their name you have to pronounce the word major. Major Khalid Musharraf, Major K.M. Shafiullah, Major Ziaur Rahman. So these were the 3 brigades, K, S and Z. Okay, now, but for unconventional guerrilla warfare, the country was divided into 11 fighting sectors as below. So how many sectors were there at the time of liberation? There were 11 fighting sectors. Here you can see the map of Bangladesh. Sectors are liberation were, you can see 1, 2, 3, 4, and here is 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 and 11. So there were 11 sectors, fighting sectors during liberation war. This is the map of liberation war. Now students, look here, you will get the areas which were under sector 1 to 11. Now I am starting with sector 1. In sector 1, the areas were Chattogram hill tracts and some parts of Noakhali. And in sector 2, Kumilla and Faridpur and Simpur, Dhaka and Noakhali districts. In sector 3, the areas were Maulavi Bazar, Brahmanbaria, Narayanganj and some parts of Keranigans. And in Sector 4, Northern Sylhet, Sodor, and Southern Haligan Central, all regions were included in Sector 4. Now, Sector 5. Northern parts of Sylhet were included in this sector. Sector 6, Rangpur and Dinajpur districts. Sector 7, the areas where Rajshahi, Dinajpur, Pabna, and Bogra districts. Sector 8, we find Kushtia, Jashur, Khulna, and some parts of Faridpur. And in Sector 9, Barishal, Patuakhali, and Khulna, and some parts of Faridpur. And Sector 10, students mark here, this is exceptional. Here we are talking about Sector 10, it was an exceptional sector. There was no regional demarcation. The soldiers of this sector attacked by enemy hide through waterways and coastal regions. Students look from Sector 1 to 11, except Sector 10 there were sector commanders, but in Sector 10 there were no sector commanders. Our fighters used to fight through waterways and coastal sea regions. Now at last we will talk about Sector 11, Tangail and Mamansingh region except Kishorganj. Students, you have to keep in mind about all these sectors, about these areas. Besides, there were some small fighting forces. Fighters were trained in different places of India. They used to take part in guerrilla warfare and frontal attacks. The regular fighting force of 30,000 soldiers were called the Mukti Force. The Mukti Force fought together with Mukti Bahini, which consisted of 1 lakh guerrilla fighters and civilians. So here we have talked about guerrilla forces and other forces. We have talked about Mukti Bahini, and here the information says about Mukti Force. The regular fighting force of 30,000 soldiers were called Mukti Force. Who are called Mukti Force? So mark this line, the regular fighting force of 30,000 soldiers was called Mukti Force. And all together, that means Mukti Force and Mukti Bahini, they have mixed together and they have fought with 1 lakh guerrilla fighters and civilians. Now students, come to page number 5. Here you can see the picture of General Muhammad Ataul Ghani Usmani. We will learn about 2 lines of him. General Usmani was known as Bongobi. So basically General Ataul Ghani Usmani is known as the group Commander-in-Chief of Mukti Bahini. General Ataul Ghani Usmani was known as Commander-in-Chief of Mukti Bahini, and he is known as Bongobi. He retired in 1972. So he retired in 1972. This is the lines, and these are very important, mark students. And now go to page number 6, lesson 3, freedom fighters. So in this lesson we will learn about our freedom fighters. The entire country was mobilized to fight the war. Every social background and every ethnic group was involved. So not only the soldiers or armed forces, but also people from every sphere, they were involved in our liberation war. Women helped the freedom fighters with food, shelter, and information. So not only the men are not only the courageous person, but also women helped in our liberation war. How they helped to the freedom fighters, or how they involved in our liberation war? As they were women, some women took part in liberation war directly, and some supplied food, shelter, and information to our freedom fighters. And like this way, they took part directly or indirectly in our liberation war. Many women directly took part in the war by taking training. That was I saying, many women directly took part in the war by taking training. So like men or armed forces, they had taken training and took part in the war. Cultural activists also played their part, raising awareness through writing, art, and performances. So our cultural activists who didn't take any armed forces, but they have raised their voice, they have raised their pain, they have written some songs, and they have performed a lot of dramas or other performances to encourage our freedom fighters. Besides these, non-residential Bengalis worked in favor of the liberation war in different countries. So here you can see the picture of freedom fighters. Here you can see women and men, both they have worked together and they have fought for the freedom of our country. In each of 11 sectors, the guerrilla forces had their instructions. Action groups carried arms and took part in frontal attacks. Intelligence corps gathered information about the enemy's movements. Joy Bangla, Banglar Joy was one of the many favorite songs of the country's people. Joy Bangla was the favorite slogan to the freedom fighters. So what was the favorite slogan of freedom fighters? It was Joy Bangla, Banglar Joy. Students, you have to keep in mind about these actions. That means action groups carried arms and took part in the frontal attacks. Intelligence groups gathered information about the enemy's movements. So you have to keep in mind these 2 points. And this for today, lesson 1 to 3. Now students, look at your homework. Your homework topic will be 10 FB. You have to do 10 fill in the blanks from lesson 1 to 3. Students, that's all for today. We have learned lesson 1, 2, 3 from chapter 1 and I have provided you homework. It will be 10 filling the blanks. You have to do your homework and don't forget to submit your homework copies on every Saturday. That's all for today. See you in our next class inshallah. Allah Hafiz. Assalamu alaikum.